don't fall, you're taken. Airlift first, then time.
Above me, life kept moving. Between steel and concrete, survival is suspended.
I knew I made a mistake the second the sun went behind the big gray cloud. The shadows got long really fast. They looked like black fingers stretching out across the dirt to grab my ankles. Everything feels too big when you are only 10 years old. The warehouse wall went up and up until it touched the sky, and the fence was taller than 3 of me stacked on top of each other. I felt like an ant that was about to get stepped on. Mom always told me to stay on the sidewalk. She said the world behind the warehouse wasn't for kids. She said there were sharp things and deep holes, but I didn't listen. I wanted to see where the trains went to sleep. The fence had a secret. Someone had cut the wires a long time ago. The bottom corner was pulled up and bent back. It looked like a metal mouth waiting to bite. The wires were rusty and orange. When I touched them, the orange dust came off on my fingers. It looked like dried blood. I tried to wipe it on my jeans, but it just made a dirty smear. I got down on my belly. The ground was cold and wet. There were sharp rocks everywhere. They were gray gravel rocks with pointy edges, and I could feel them poking through my t-shirt. I wiggled forward. My backpack got caught on a wire tooth. I froze. I was scared that if I pulled too hard, the fence would make a loud noise and the security guard would come. I moved slow like a worm. I unhooked the strap and pushed my body through the hole. The air on the other side was different. It didn't smell like grass or rain. It smelled like old pennies that you find under the couch cushions. It tasted metallic in the back of my throat. There was another smell too, like when my dad drives his car with the brakes on. Burnt rubber. It made my stomach do a flip. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my knees. My sneakers crunched on the stones. The sound was too loud in the quiet air. I looked at the sign hanging on the fence. It was white with red letters, but the red was almost gone from the sun. It said, danger. I know that word. It means turn back. It means run away.
But I didn't run. I looked ahead. The tracks were there. They were shiny lines of steel cutting through the dark dirt. And on the tracks, the big black shapes were waiting. The trains. They were sleeping, but they looked heavy and mean. I just wanted to touch one, just one time. My heart was beating so hard against my ribs, it felt like a bird trying to break out of a cage. I took one step, then another. The gravel shifted under my feet. I shouldn't be here. I really shouldn't be here. I reached into my pocket. My fingers touched the cold metal. It was the quarter my dad gave me last week. He said it was a lucky quarter because it was made the same year he was born. It felt heavy and important. I squeezed it hard in my fist until the rigid edges dug into my skin. I wanted to put it on the rail. The big kids at school said if you leave a coin on the shiny metal line, the train crushes it flat. They said it turns into a magic smooth disc. I wanted to see if it was true, but the tracks were down at the bottom of a big hill. It wasn't a grass hill. It was a hill made of gray stones and dry dirt. It looked very steep. I stood at the edge and looked down. The ground seemed to drop away too fast. It made me feel dizzy, like when you stand on the edge of the high dive at the pool. My sneakers were old and the bottoms were smooth, so they didn't grip very well. I took a breath and held it in my chest. I took one step down. The rocks moved. They weren't stuck to the ground. They rolled under my feet like hundreds of hard marbles. I tried to balance, waving my free arm, but the hill was too mean. My foot slipped on a loose stone. I fell backward. My bottom hit the sharp gravel hard. It hurt a lot. I started sliding down. The dust flew up into my nose and made me cough. The world turned into a blurry mix of gray sky and gray dirt. I tried to grab the ground to stop, but the rocks just cut my hands. I was sliding fast, right toward the bottom. My hand hit a big rock, and my fist popped open. I watched the silver quarter fly out. It looked like a little shooting star. It bounced on a flat stone.
Then it bounced again. It was rolling fast, faster than me. I stopped sliding at the bottom, but the quarter kept going. It rolled right over the wooden ties. It hit the metal rail and jumped over it. It didn't stop until it was underneath the train. I sat up and wiped the dust off my face. My hands were stinging and red. There was a little blood on my palm, mixed with the gray dirt, but I didn't care about the blood. I stared at the train. Up close, the train was terrifying. It was so tall. The wheels were made of solid steel, and they were higher than my head. They looked like they could crush a house without even slowing down. The train was sitting still, but it felt alive. It made little ticking noises as the metal cooled down. It smelled like hot oil and old grease. It smelled like a machine that eats things. I crawled on my hands and knees toward the tracks. The ground here was black and sticky. I looked under the train. It was dark under there. There were hanging chains and big metal boxes and pig pipes. It looked like the belly of a robot beast. The shadows were thick and heavy. And there, right in the middle of the darkness, I saw a tiny glint, my quarter. It was sitting on a wooden tie, right between the two rails. It was in the shadow of the giant wheel. I knew I shouldn't go under there. Mom would scream if she knew. If the train moved, I would be stuck. I would be squashed flat, just like the coin was supposed to be. My legs were shaking so bad they felt like jelly. My heart was thumping in my ears like a drum. But I couldn't leave it. It was Dad's lucky quarter. If I lost it, maybe the luck would go away too. Maybe something bad would happen to him. I had to get it back. I looked at the giant metal wheel. It was silent. I took a deep breath of the oily air and got ready to crawl into the dark. The sun went away when I crawled forward. It didn't set. The train just ate it. I put one hand on the wooden tie. It felt slimy. It was covered in black stuff that smelled like burning road. I pulled my knees up and slid my body into the shadow. The air under here was different. It was colder, but it was also heavy.
It felt like the air inside an old garage where nobody goes anymore. I looked up. That was a mistake. From the outside, the train looked smooth, but underneath, it was a mess of ugly metal. There were thick pipes that twisted around like gray snakes. There were heavy chains hanging down that didn't hold anything. Big boxes of steel were bolted to the bottom, dripping with black goo. It looked like the inside of a robot's stomach. It looked like it was full of guts made of iron and rust. I was so small down here. The space between the ground and the metal belly was tight. If I stood up, I would hit my head. If the train sat down, I would be gone. I would just be a stain on the rocks. My eyes found the quarter. It wasn't shiny anymore. It was half buried in a pile of black mud right next to the other rail. The mud looked sticky, like chocolate pudding that went bad. I scooted forward on my belly. The rocks dug into my stomach. My shirt scraped against the gravel. I reached out my hand. My fingers were shaking. They looked like little pink worms against the dark ground. I touched the quarter. It was stuck. The mud held onto it tight. I used my fingernail to dig. The mud felt cold and greasy. It got under my nails. It felt like the train was trying to keep my dad's luck for itself. I scraped harder. My heart was beating against the rocks. Thump, thump, thump. It was the only sound in the world. Then the quiet broke. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a wet noise. A drop of thick black oil fell from the metal guts above me. It landed right on the back of my hand. It was hot. It burned my skin a little bit. I jumped, but I couldn't go anywhere. I wiped my hand on the dirt, but the black stain smeared. It looked like a bruise. I looked up again, terrified. A pipe above my head let out a long, slow breath. It sounded like a tire leaking, but deeper. A cloud of white steam shot out near my face. The train wasn't just a machine. It was breathing. It was sleeping, and I was right under its chest. The steam smelled sour and old. I grabbed the quarter with my whole fist and yanked it out of the mud. I had it.
But now the steam was getting thicker, and the metal pipes were making little pinging noises like they were stretching. The giant steel wheel next to my head let out a deep groan. It moved just a tiny bit, maybe an inch. The ground trembled under my knees. The giant was waking up. The noise was the biggest thing I ever heard. It started right above my ears. It wasn't like a car horn or a dog barking. It was a long, sharp scream of air. It sounded like a million angry snakes were hiding in the pipes, and they all hissed at the exact same time. The sound was so high and sharp that it made my teeth hurt. I tried to cover my ears with my shoulders, but the noise went right through my bones. The air changed instantly. A thick white cloud shot out from the metal belly. It swirled around my face so fast I couldn't see the rocks anymore. It didn't smell like the steam from my mom's tea kettle. It smelled sour. It smelled like rotten eggs that had been smashed on the sidewalk in the middle of July. The smell stuck to the back of my throat. I coughed, but the air tasted like old pennies. I had to get out. I squeezed the quarter tight in my fist. It hurt my palm, but I didn't let go. I pushed backward with my feet. My sneakers slipped on the greasy gravel. I kicked hard, trying to slide my body back toward the sunlight. I wanted to be away from the iron guts. I wanted to be anywhere else. I scooted back 2 times, then I stopped. I couldn't go any further. Something had me. I pulled my shoulders forward, but my body didn't move. My backpack was stuck. I twisted my head to look over my shoulder. It was hard to see through the white fog, but I saw a piece of rusted metal hanging down. It looked like a crooked finger made of iron. It had hooked right through the top loop of my bag. I yanked. I pulled so hard my neck hurt. The strap didn't break. The hook didn't move. It was thick and cold and covered in grease. It was stronger than me. It was stronger than my dad. It held on to me like it wanted to keep me there forever. Panic felt like ice water pouring into my stomach. I couldn't breathe right. The white steam was getting thicker, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. It felt like the train was building a cage made of smoke. Then the ground jumped. It wasn't a little tremble this time. The whole earth shook under my knees. The rocks rattled against each other. Above me, the metal groaned. It sounded like a giant waking up from a long nap and stretching his stiff bones. A loud clanking noise echoed through the belly of the train. It was the sound of something heavy locking into place. The huge steel wheel next to my face turned. It moved slow and heavy. It scraped against the rail. Bright yellow sparks fell down like tiny broken stars. They landed near my nose. They were hot and scary. "Let go," I whispered. My voice sounded tiny. It sounded like a baby's voice. I clawed at my chest. I tried to find the plastic buckles on my backpack straps. My fingers were slippery with the black mud from the ground. I couldn't feel the clips. I just felt the heavy weight of the train pressing down on the air. The hissing noise got louder, screaming at me to run, but the iron finger held me tight. I was attached to the monster now, and the monster was starting to move. The noise changed. It wasn't just air anymore. It was a deep, angry sound that came from the metal bones of the train. It sounded like 2 giant hammers hitting each other in the dark. The sound shook the rocks under my tummy. It shook the teeth in my head. The huge wheel in front of my nose turned. It didn't spin fast. It moved slow and heavy, like a monster waking up from a bad dream. It moved just 1 inch. But that 1 inch was enough. The iron finger hooked on my backpack pulled me. It yanked me forward. I wasn't heavy enough to stop it. I was just a kid. The sharp stones on the ground scraped my stomach. My shirt rode up, and the gravel felt like sandpaper on my skin. I tried to dig my fingers into the dirt to stop sliding, but the dirt was wet and oily. I just left long lines in the mud. I kicked my legs. I kicked hard. I wanted to push away from the wheel. I wanted to push away from the hot steam. My left foot found something solid.
It was the wooden block that the track sat on. It felt safe. I pushed against it to make myself slide back. Then the train moved another inch. A heavy black bar hung down near the ground. It moved with the train. As the train rolled forward, the bar swung closer to the wood. My leg was in the middle. I tried to pull my foot back, but I was too slow. The metal bar pressed against my shin. It squeezed my leg against the wooden track. It wasn't sharp like a knife. It was dull and heavy. It felt like a car had parked on my ankle. The pressure got worse. The metal pushed through my jeans and bit into my skin. It squeezed so hard I thought my bone was going to snap like a dry twig. "Ah!" I screamed. I opened my mouth as wide as I could. I yelled until my throat felt like it was bleeding. I wanted my dad to come lift the train. I wanted a policeman to stop the wheels. But the sound of my voice didn't go anywhere. The roar of the engine was too big. It swallowed my scream. The train was louder than a thunderstorm. It was louder than everything in the world. I stopped kicking. I couldn't kick anymore. The metal bar had my leg trapped tight. The backpack hook had my shoulders trapped tight.
I was stretched out on the wet rocks. The pain in my leg was hot. It throbbed like a second heartbeat, fast and scary. I couldn't wiggle my toes. I couldn't pull my knee up. The train had locked me in place. I looked at the giant steel wheel. It was only a few inches from my face. It was tall and dirty and covered in grease. It was waiting to move again. I was stuck to the tracks, and the monster was hungry. I twisted my neck as far as it would go. The sharp gravel dug into my cheek, but I didn't care about the scratches anymore. I just wanted to see the world outside. Under the train, everything was black metal and dripping oil. But just a few feet away, past the heavy steel wheels, I could see the daylight. It looked gray and foggy, but it was real. Then I saw something move. It wasn't a shadow. It was solid. 2 feet landed on the stones outside. They were huge. They weren't wearing sneakers like mine. They were wearing giant rubber boots.
They were bright orange, the same color as the safety cones my gym teacher put out for soccer practice. They looked thick and heavy. The pants tucked into them were blue and dirty. My heart jumped so hard it hit my ribs. A person, a grown-up. Adults fix things. Adults stop bad things from happening. If my dad was here, he would yell at the train and make it stop. This man in the orange boots could save me. He was right there. He was so close I could almost reach out and almost touch the rubber toes if my arm wasn't stuck. "Hey!" I yelled. I pushed the air out of my chest as hard as I could. The words scratched my throat. I waited for the boots to stop. I waited for the man to kneel down and look under the train. I waited to see his face. The boots didn't stop. They kept walking. They crunched over the rocks. They moved fast, like the man was late for work. He was marching right past me. "Help!" I screamed again. My voice sounded tiny. It sounded like a squeaky toy buried under a pile of blankets. The man didn't slow down. He didn't turn his feet. He didn't know a boy was crushed underneath the iron belly of the machine. He just kept walking. Then the train decided to scream louder than me. The engine at the front wasn't just humming anymore. It took a giant breath. The noise wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from deep inside the metal. It felt like a monster growling in a cave. The ground under my stomach started to bounce. The pebbles danced around my nose. The vibration traveled up my trapped leg and rattled my teeth. The train was getting ready to run, and it was shaking with power. I watched the orange boots get smaller. They walked away into the fog. They became little orange spots, and then they were gone. I let my head drop back onto the wet stones. I was invisible. I was just a piece of trash stuck on the tracks. The world was right there, walking by in big orange boots, and it didn't care that I was about to die. I was smaller than the noise. I was smaller than the train. I was all alone in the dark, and the monster was ready to leave the station.
The orange boots were gone, but the shaking stayed. The train was vibrating so hard that my teeth clicked together. I tried to keep my head still on the rocks, but the ground was bouncing. Then the ceiling cried on me. It started with just one drop. It landed right in the middle of my forehead. It didn't feel like rain. Rain is cold and splashes. This was warm. It was thick and heavy. It sat on my skin like a wet blister. I tried to shake my head to get it off, but my neck was too stiff. I was stuck looking up at the black metal pipes. Another drop fell. This one hit my cheek. It slid down my face slowly. It felt like a slug crawling toward my mouth. I stuck my tongue out to push it away, but I accidentally tasted it. It was terrible. It tasted like old pennies and poison. It tasted like the smell of my dad's car when the engine is broken. It was oil. I realized the train was sweating. The monster above me was working so hard to wake up that it was sweating black slime all over me. The shaking made it worse. Every time the metal shivered, more drops shook loose from the dark, greasy belly of the machine. One big drop landed right in my open eye. The pain was instant. It wasn't like getting shampoo in your eyes during a bath. It burned. It felt like someone had poked me with a hot needle. I gasped, but the air was full of dust. I jammed my fists into my eyes to wipe it away. That was a big mistake. My hands were covered in sharp dirt and gravel dust. I just rubbed grit and more oil into my eyes. The burning got worse. It felt like fire was spreading inside my head. I squeezed my eyelids shut as tight as I could, but the black stuff was already inside. Tears tried to wash it out, but they just mixed with the oil. Now I was crying black tears. I was blind. I couldn't see the gray daylight anymore. I couldn't see the rocks. I was trapped in the dark with the smell of gas and old metal. The air felt thick in my throat. I coughed, and my chest hurt. I felt so dirty. I was covered in the train's blood. I wanted to be clean. I wanted to be in my bathtub with my toy boats, where the water was clear and warm.
But I was here, underneath the iron belly, and it was raining poison on my face. The train gave a sudden jerk. The metal groaned above me. The wheels squealed like a hurt animal. The shower of oil got faster. It was everywhere now. In my hair, in my ears, down the back of my neck. It was sticky and hot. I curled up as small as I could, but I couldn't hide. I was just a small boy in the dark, and the black rain found me everywhere. My eyes still burned from the black oil, but I stopped crying because the ground changed. The rocks under my stomach didn't just shiver anymore, they jumped. It felt like a giant was stomping on the earth, getting closer and closer. I tried to wipe the slime from my eyelashes so I could see. The world was blurry and stinging. At first I thought the train above me was falling down. I thought the metal belly was finally crushing me. But the noise wasn't coming from up, it was coming from the side. It started as a low hum, like a million angry bees inside a jar. Then it turned into a roar. It happened so fast I didn't have time to move. A wall of wind hit me. It didn't feel like air. It felt hard and heavy, like someone had thrown a mattress at me. It slapped the side of my face and pushed me into the sharp gravel. I tried to take a breath, but the wind stole the air from my mouth. It was another train. It was on the tracks right next to me. This one wasn't stopped. It wasn't sleeping. It was running. It was going so fast that I couldn't see the cars. It was just a long gray blur, rushing past like a river made of iron. The noise was bigger than anything I had ever heard. It wasn't just in my ears, it was inside my teeth. My ribs rattled against my shirt. I pressed my hands over my ears as hard as I could, but the sound went right through my fingers. It felt like the screaming metal was inside my head. It hurt. It hurt so much I wanted to scream back, but I knew no one would hear me. The roar swallowed everything. The fast train was kicking up the world. Dust and dirt flew into the air and swirled around me. Small stones hit my arms like little stinging bullets.
The dust went up my nose and coated my tongue. It tasted dry and sour, like rust and old dirt. I coughed, but I couldn't hear myself. Then the wind changed. It stopped pushing and started pulling. My dad told me once to never stand too close to the yellow line on the platform because a fast train can grab you. I remembered that now. My loose shirt started flapping hard, reaching toward the spinning wheels. My shoelaces lifted up and danced toward the track. The train was hungry. It wanted to suck me in. I was so scared. The wheels were a blur of silver and grease. They looked like round knives chopping the track. They were only a few feet away from my nose. If I rolled over, if I moved just a tiny bit, the wheels would catch me. They would eat me up. I dug my fingers into the dirty rocks. I grabbed the ground as hard as I could. I curled my knees up to my chest and buried my face in my arms. I tried to make myself heavy. I tried to be a rock. I squeezed my eyes shut, but I could still feel the rush of the heavy metal flying past me. The ground bounced so hard that my elbows bruised against the stones. The train felt like it was a mile long. It just kept coming. The wind kept pulling at my hair and my clothes, trying to drag me under the wheels. I held my breath and waited for the monster to pass, feeling like the smallest thing in the whole world. The fast train finally went away. It took the wind and the noise with it, leaving a hole in the air where the screaming used to be. The silence that came back was heavy. It felt like a thick blanket falling over my head. My ears were still ringing, a high and sharp sound like a whistle that wouldn't stop blowing inside my head. I waited for the ground to stop buzzing against my chest. I opened my eyes slowly. The dust was floating down around me like dirty snow. It settled on my arms and made the black oil look gray. I didn't want to move yet. I was afraid that if I moved, the loud roar would come back and eat me. So I just lay there listening to my own heart. It was beating so hard against the rocks that it hurt my ribs. Then I heard a new sound.
It wasn't a big sound. It was small and scratchy. It sounded like fingernails scraping against dry stone. It was coming from the dark corner near the wheel of the sleeping train above me. I held my breath. I thought maybe it was a person coming to help, but the sound was too low to the ground. Two gray shapes slipped out from the shadows. They moved fast, like water spilling over the gravel. They weren't shadows, they were animals. They were rats, but they didn't look like the ones in my science book at school. These were huge.
They were as big as my dad's work boots. Their fur was greasy and spiked, sticking up in strange clumps like they had been dipped in glue. They didn't walk nice. They scurried with their bellies low to the sharp rocks. I froze. My skin went cold and bumpy. I hate rats. I hate the way they move. They came closer. They had long pink tails that dragged behind them. The tails had no fur. They looked like raw worms wiggling over the dirt. It made my stomach turn over. I wanted to scramble away, but there was nowhere to go. The wall was on one side and the big metal wheel was on the other. The biggest rat stopped. It lifted its nose into the air. Its nose was pink and wet, twitching back and forth really fast. It smelled the oil. It smelled the dust. Then it looked right at me. Its eyes were small, black beads. There was no white part in them, just darkness. They looked shiny and mean. The rat didn't run away. Usually when you look at a squirrel or a bird, it gets scared and leaves. This rat didn't care. It stared at me like I was just another rock or a piece of trash left on the track. The second rat crept forward. It came right up to my foot. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my sneaker. It sniffed the rubber toe of my shoe. Its long white whiskers brushed against my laces. I could see its yellow teeth poking out from its lip. They looked like little needles. A shiver went all the way up my back to my neck. I couldn't help it. I kicked my leg out. I wanted to scream, but my throat was too dry. I kicked at the air, trying to push the gray thing away. I expected them to run into the dark.
I expected them to be afraid of a human boy, but they didn't run. They just jumped back a few inches. They landed lightly on their feet and turned back to face me. The big one let out a small, hissing breath. They weren't scared of my kick. They stayed right there, watching me with those black button eyes. They knew I was trapped under the iron belly. They knew I couldn't stand up. They were waiting to see if I would stop moving again. The sun started to get tired. It fell down behind the trees and took all the orange light with it. The world didn't turn black right away. It turned into a dusty gray color first. The shadows under the train started to grow. They stretched out across the gravel like long black fingers trying to touch me. I watched them crawl over my sneakers. They moved slow, but they didn't stop. I pulled my legs in tight to my chest, but the shadows covered me anyway. The air changed. When the sun was up, the metal belly of the train was hot. It felt like standing near an oven. But now the heat was gone. The metal above me turned cold. It happened really fast. I touched the iron beam over my head and pulled my hand back. It felt like touching an ice cube. The cold came down from the metal and wrapped around me. It wasn't just on my skin. It felt like the cold was trying to get inside my bones. My jacket has a rip in the sleeve from when I fell earlier. The fabric is torn open. The cold wind found the hole. It felt like cold water trickling down my arm. I tried to pinch the hole shut with my fingers, but my hands were getting stiff. They didn't want to work right. My fingers looked blue in the gray light. They felt like they belonged to someone else. Then the gray went away, and the real dark came. It isn't like the dark in my bedroom. When my mom turns off the light, I can still see the shape of my closet and the line of light under the door. This dark is different. It is thick. It looks like someone poured black paint over my eyes. I held my hand up in front of my face, but I couldn't see it. I blinked hard, but nothing changed. It felt like the world had disappeared and left me all alone in a box. My body started to do things I didn't tell it to do. I started to shake. It began in my shoulders and then went down to my legs. I couldn't stop it. My knees knocked together. My teeth started making a noise. They were clicking against each other really fast. It sounded like two small stones hitting together inside my mouth. It hurt my jaw. I tried to bite my tongue to make it stop, but my jaw just kept jumping up and down. I am so cold. The ground under me is sharp and freezing. The rocks poke into my side. I closed my eyes tight. I pretended I was at home. I thought about the hallway upstairs. We have a nightlight there. It is shaped like a little green turtle. It glows and keeps the bad shadows away. I wanted to see the green turtle so bad it made my stomach hurt. I wanted to hear the TV on downstairs. But there is no TV here. There is no green turtle. There is only the heavy dark. The air under the train feels heavy, like a blanket made of lead pressing down on me. I can feel the weight of the night sitting on my chest. It makes it hard to breathe. The wind blew through the metal wheels. It made a low, whistling sound. It sounded like the train was whispering mean secrets to the night. I curled into a tiny ball and tucked my nose into my shirt to find some warm air. I am too small for this dark. I am just a kid. I want the sun to come back. The cold didn't wake me up this time. It was my throat. It felt like someone had rubbed sandpaper all over the inside of my neck. I tried to swallow, but I couldn't. There was nothing there to swallow. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. It was stuck to the roof, dry and rough. It felt like I had been chewing on a wool blanket. When I peeled my tongue away, it stung. My lips felt like old paper that might rip if I moved them too much. I sat up slowly. My head felt heavy and wobbly, like a balloon on a string that was losing its air. The world spun around a little bit before it stopped. I rubbed my eyes. They felt scratchy, like there was dust under my eyelids. I thought about the kitchen sink at home. I thought about the silver handle you pull up to make the water come out. It comes out fast and clear. Sometimes if you let it run, it gets really cold. I imagined holding a glass under it.
I could see the little drops of water on the outside of the glass. I could almost feel the cold wetness on my lips. I thought about the garden hose in the summer and how the water tastes like rubber but feels so good when it hits your face. Thinking about it made my mouth hurt worse. I looked down at the gravel near the big metal wheel. There was a small dip in the ground. A little bit of water was sitting there. It must have rained before I got here, or maybe the train leaked something. It didn't look like the water from my sink. It was dark and murky. There were swirls of colors floating on top of it. They looked like rainbows that had been smashed and melted. Purple and green and blue oil mixed together. They were shiny, but not in a good way. I crawled toward it on my hands and knees. The sharp rocks bit into my skin through my jeans. I didn't care. I just wanted the dry feeling to stop. I got close enough to smell it. It didn't smell like rain. It smelled like the gas station. It smelled like old tires and burnt things. I stared at the oil rainbows. They moved slowly on top of the black water. I reached my hand out. My fingers were shaking. I wanted to cup the water in my hands and drink it all. I wanted to wash the sand out of my throat. I leaned my head down. The fumes made my nose crinkle. But then I heard my mom's voice in my head. She sounded serious. She told me once that you can never drink water from the ground. She said there are tiny bugs in it that you can't see. She said dirty water makes your stomach twist up and makes you sicker than anything. She said it is like drinking poison. I pulled my hand back. I stared at the puddle. It was right there. It was so close I could touch it with my nose if I leaned down, but I couldn't drink it. The want was so big it made my chest hurt. It felt like a heavy stone was sitting in my belly. My stomach made a loud, angry noise. It cramped up tight. It felt like someone was squeezing my insides with a fist. I wrapped my arms around my middle and rocked back and forth. I wanted to cry. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the tears. Usually when I am scared, the tears come fast and hot. But my eyes stayed dry. They burned, but no water came out.
I didn't have any water left inside me to make tears. I looked at the puddle again. The oil rainbows stared back at me. They looked like toxic eyes watching me suffer. I lay my head down on the rail, just inches away from the wetness. The metal smelled like rust. I opened my mouth and breathed in the damp air, hoping it would help. It didn't. The dry sand in my throat just scratched more. I am so thirsty. I am so empty. I just watched the poison water and wished it was clean.
kept my eyes squeezed shut as tight as I could. If I squeezed them hard enough, I saw little flashes of light, like tiny stars exploding behind my eyelids. I stayed very still. I pretended the cold floor was my soft mattress. I pretended the shaking of the ground was just my dad walking down the hallway with his heavy boots. For a second, the darkness turned into my kitchen. I could see it so clearly. The light was yellow and warm. It didn't hurt my eyes. I could smell dinner. It smelled like the cheese powder from the blue box. It smelled like butter and salt. It was the best smell in the entire world. I heard a spoon hit a plastic bowl. It was my red bowl, the one with the scratch on the side. "Dinner," a voice said.
It was Mom. She sounded so close. Her voice wasn't scared or sad. It was soft. It sounded like safety. It sounded like warm towels from the dryer. "I'm coming," I whispered. My voice cracked because my throat was so dry, but in my head, I sounded happy. I reached out my hand to take the bowl. I wanted the warm noodles. I wanted to feel my belly get full. I opened my eyes. The kitchen shattered like a dropped plate. It broke into a million pieces and disappeared. The warm yellow smell vanished instantly. It was replaced by the smell of old pennies and wet dirt. The air was freezing. It sat on my chest like a heavy brick. I wasn't in my chair. I was curled up on the hard, vibrating floor. The walls were still made of rusty metal. They were tall and dark and mean. They looked like they were leaning in to crush me. It was a trick. My brain played a mean trick on me. I felt a hot lump in my throat.
It wasn't food. It was sadness. It hurt worse than the thirst. I wanted to scream at the walls for not being my kitchen. I wanted to kick the metal, but I knew it would just hurt my foot. Then I heard the noise. It came from the corner where the shadows were the blackest. It was a scratching sound. It sounded like sharp fingernails dragging quickly across the floor. It stopped, and then it started again, scraping and digging. I pulled my knees up to my chin. I tried to make myself into a tiny ball. If I was small enough, maybe the darkness wouldn't find me. Rats. I knew they were rats. I didn't see them, but I knew. I pictured their long pink tails sliding over the dirty floor. I pictured their beady eyes glowing in the dark, watching me. My dad told me once that rats can chew through wood. He said they are always hungry. I am hungry too, but I don't want to be eaten. The scratching got louder. It sounded like there was more than one. Maybe a whole family of them. Maybe an army. They were whispering with their little feet. They were coming to see if I was soft enough to bite. I had to make it stop. I had to make the noise go away. I couldn't cover my ears because my arms were hugging my legs too tight. So I used my voice. I had to fill up the room so there was no space for the rats. I said. It came out like a broken croak. The scratching stopped for a second. The silence was heavy. Then the scratching started again, faster this time. I needed to be louder. I needed to talk to the biggest thing here, the train. The train was a giant metal monster. It had an iron belly and I was trapped inside it. Maybe if I was nice to it, it wouldn't let the rats get me. Maybe it would spit me out. "Please," I said to the rusty wall, "Mr. Train." I rocked back and forth. The floor shook under me, rattling my bones against the wood. "I'm not a bad kid," I told the bolts in the wall. "I clean my room, I do my homework, I eat my vegetables, usually." I talked until my throat felt like it was bleeding. I told the train about my bike with the blue streamers.
I told it about my dog and how he sleeps on my feet. I just kept talking. If I stopped talking, the scratching would come back. And if the scratching came back, the rats would come closer. I just want my mom. I just want the macaroni. But all I have is the iron belly and the dark things waiting in the corners. The shaking stopped. I didn't notice it at first.
because my body was still vibrating. My bones felt like they were buzzing, like when you touch a vacuum cleaner while it's on. But the big, loud rumbling was gone. The monster had stopped moving. The iron belly was still. The silence was worse than the noise. The noise was like a blanket that covered everything up, but the silence felt like it was waiting for something. It felt like holding your breath underwater right before you have to come up for air. My ears made a high, thin whistling sound because they missed the roar of the wheels. I uncurled my legs just a little bit. My muscles were stiff and hard, like old rubber bands that might snap if you pull them too fast. I looked around the dark box. Then I saw it. It was a thin line, sharp and white. It cut through a crack in the metal wall that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the warm yellow light from my dream kitchen. This light was angry. It was the color of a bone. It sliced through the dusty air and hit the floor. Dust motes danced inside the beam like tiny floating ghosts. I scooted closer, dragging my bottom across the cold floor. I put my eye near the crack. Outside, the world was black, but the light was moving. It was a long, white finger pointing at the ground. It swept back and forth over gray rocks. The rocks looked sharp. They looked like teeth waiting to bite anyone who fell out of the train. The light danced over them, searching. It looked for things in the dark. Maybe it was looking for me. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. It beat so hard I thought it would break my chest. I needed to tell the light I was here. I needed to make it stop moving so it could see me. "Hey," I tried to say. Nothing happened.
My voice was gone. It wasn't even a whisper. It was just a dry squeak, like a mouse stepping on a twig. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of sand. I coughed, but it didn't help. The sound was too small. The iron belly was too big, and the outside world was too huge. No one would hear a mouse squeak in the dark. I needed to be big. I needed to be loud. My hand touched something on the floor. It was a rock. It was cold and rough, about the size of an apple. It must have bounced in through the hole a long time ago. I grabbed it. My fingers were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I looked up. Near the door there was a big metal wheel. It looked like the steering wheel on a pirate ship, but made of rusty iron. It was heavy and solid. I stood up. My legs wobbled. I lifted the rock high above my head. It felt heavy, but I held it tight. I swung my arm down as hard as I could. The rock hit the metal wheel. It didn't make a thud. It made a high, singing noise. It rang out sharp and clear, like a church bell being hit with a hammer. The sound vibrated through my hand and up my arm. It echoed inside the metal box. I hit it again. The ringing sound flew out through the crack in the wall. Outside, the white finger stopped moving. It froze on a pile of gray stones. I held my breath. I squeezed the rock so hard my knuckles turned white. The beam of light snapped away from the rocks. It moved fast, blurring through the air. It turned straight toward the crack. It turned straight toward me. It hit my face like a slap. The light was blinding. It was brighter than the sun. It filled up my eyes with white fire. I couldn't see the walls anymore. I couldn't see the floor. I couldn't see my own hands. There was only the terrible, burning white. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the light was so strong it went right through my eyelids. It felt like I was staring into the center of a star that had fallen to earth. I was caught. The white light didn't burn me. It just made everything disappear for a second. When I blinked the spots away, the silence was broken.
Voices came first. They were deep and loud, booming from outside the crack. They shouted things I didn't understand. Then the metal wall started to shake again, but not from the wheels this time. Someone was pulling on it. I scuttled backward until my back hit the cold wall. I wanted to be small. I wanted to be a pebble that no one would notice. The crack in the wall got wider. A piece of the metal peeled back like the lid of a sardine can. A face appeared in the hole. It was a man. He was wearing a helmet that looked like a yellow turtle shell. His jacket was bright yellow too, with silver stripes that glowed when the light hit them. He looked too big for the hole, but he pushed himself through anyway. He grunted and wiggled until he was inside the iron belly with me. The box felt tiny now. He took up all the air. He crawled toward me on his hands and knees. The floor was dirty, but he didn't care. When he got close, a smell hit my nose. It was strong and bitter and warm. It smelled like my dad's kitchen in the morning. It smelled like coffee. The smell made my eyes sting. It didn't belong in the dark, cold train. It belonged in a safe place. "Hey there, buddy," the man said. His voice was scratchy. He took off a thick leather glove. His hand was huge. It was the size of a baseball mitt. He reached out and touched my shoulder. His hand was warm, but I flinched. I thought he might grab me. "You're okay," he said. He turned his head and yelled at the hole. He told the other yellow jacket men to bring the cutter. I didn't know what a cutter was. I thought maybe it was scissors. Scissors are for paper. But when they passed the machine through the hole, it wasn't scissors. It was a monster made of metal and orange plastic. It had a long, flat arm and a round wheel on the end. The wheel had teeth, sharp, jagged teeth that looked like they could chew through bone. The man inside with me covered my ears with his big hands. "Close your eyes," he told me. I didn't close them. I watched the other man pull a cord on the machine. The machine roared. It wasn't like a car engine. It was a high, angry scream. The sound went right into my teeth and made them hurt. It was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The air in the box started to smell like gasoline and smoke. The man with the machine touched the spinning wheel to the wall of the iron belly. The world exploded into fire. A fountain of orange sparks shot out. They sprayed everywhere. They looked like a million angry fireflies swarming into the box. They bounced off the walls and the floor. They were beautiful and terrible. The noise got even louder, a grinding screech that felt like it was tearing the air apart. I pressed my face into the coffee-smelling man's jacket. I squeezed my eyes shut now. I was shaking so hard my teeth clicked together. The machine screamed and the sparks flew. They were cutting the iron belly open. But the machine was so close, the teeth were spinning so fast. I was scared the man would slip. I was scared the angry wheel would forget about the wall and bite me instead. I curled into a tiny ball and waited for the sharp teeth to touch my skin. The screaming machine stopped. It didn't fade away, it just cut off, leaving a ringing sound in my ears that was louder than the noise had been. The piece of the metal wall fell outward. It hit the ground with a heavy thud that I felt in my bones. The coffee-smelling man didn't wait. He grabbed me under my arms. His hands were huge and firm. He lifted me up like I was a rag doll. My legs didn't want to work. They felt like they were filled with wet sand. I tried to stand, but my knees wobbled and gave up. He didn't let me fall. He passed me through the jagged hole he had made. "Easy, watch his head," someone said from the outside. I pulled my elbows in tight to my ribs. The edges of the hole were glowing red where the machine had cut them. I was scared the metal would reach out and burn me one last time. I held my breath until I was all the way through.
Then the air hit me. It was a slap. It was so cold. It rushed into my nose and down my throat. It didn't taste like rust or old pennies or sweat anymore. It tasted like wet grass and dirt. It tasted sharp. I shivered so hard my shoulders jumped. There were so many lights. Red lights were spinning around and around. They flashed over the trees and the ground. The world looked like it was bleeding. The lights made the shadows of the trees jump back and forth. It made the people look like monsters with red faces. There were so many people, giants in uniforms. They were all talking at once. It sounded like a radio that wasn't tuned in right, just static and noise. Hands were everywhere. Someone touched my neck. Someone touched my wrist. Someone put something plastic on my finger. A lady put a blanket over me. It was orange and scratchy, but I pulled it up to my chin. I wanted to hide inside it. "Let's get him on the stretcher," the lady said. They lifted me onto a bed with wheels. It was narrow and hard. They strapped me down with belts. I didn't like the belts. They felt like the metal bars. I wanted to kick them off, but I was too tired. The bed started to roll. The wheels crunched over the gravel. The vibration tickled my back. I looked up. Inside the iron belly, the ceiling was always right there. It was dark and close. It pressed down on me. But now the ceiling was gone. The sky was too big. It went on forever. It was a giant black bowl turned upside down over the world. I felt like I might fall upward into it. There were no bars to hold me down. There were just stars, millions of white dots. They looked cold and far away. They didn't care about me. They just stared down with unblinking eyes. I closed my eyes to stop the dizziness. The ambulance doors were open ahead. It was another box, but this one was bright and clean. I was out. The coffee man said I was safe.
But as they pushed me into the back of the ambulance, I took a breath. My chest didn't move right. It felt tight. The metal walls were gone, and the heavy door was gone, but the weight was still there. It felt like the iron belly was still sitting on top of my chest, invisible and heavy, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to push it off.